So what was Dolly? What was her last name?
Welcome everyone. Good day to you in whatever part of the world you are in. This is, as you know, the fifth and final class of our exploration, transmission of the light, our exploration of Denkoroku, Zen Master Keizan's stories, talks about the ancestors of Soto Zen. So this evening we're doing a little bit different format, and so I'm going to give a brief recap, and then we'll have some time for discussion and Q&A around that. But then instead of small groups, we're going to have the sharing. And as you all know, the sharing is optional, but it's a good exercise. It's a bit of it's like answering a koan in a way. So you can see what comes up for you in the moment, or maybe you have something planned. And then we'll end with sharing the merits of our practice. So with that, let me get on with the recap for this evening. So we are near the end of our text here, actually at the end of our text. So we're looking this evening at Rujing and Dogen and Eijo. And so working from the Cleary translation, having a look at Zen Master Rujing was practicing with Zhuzhang. And Zhuzhang had been asking him, how can you purify that which has never been impure or defiled? And it took him, it says, more than a year to wake up suddenly to the meaning of that question. And then he said, I've hit upon that which is undefiled. But even before he finished speaking, Zhuzhan hit him. And why is that? Because I don't hit upon enlightenment. That's not how it works. So he broke out in a sweat, meaning he immediately recognized that there was a mistake there. And then he bowed. And so that is a very classical way of non-verbally expressing one's statement, one's recognition of a teaching. And then he was approved by Zhuzhan. So this is very much a story in keeping with what we've been seeing all along, which is that purity and impurity, that kind of discernment, that kind of dualistic ability to discriminate things is something that we experience in the midst of the totality of non-separation. And that non-separation doesn't have those kinds of valences or those the two sides. So then we hear a little bit of Rujing's backstory. And again, so he was in China And he was very humble, it said, even after that, right? He was the one cleaning the toilets, and he declined to wear the fancy purple robe. My master had a fancy purple robe, so I've seen one. He would only wear it for a couple of big ceremonies a year. And he was very dedicated to sitting, right? But then he makes this statement. So he used to declare that the way of the founders has died out in the last century or two. And we don't know whether this is him boasting or whether ideally it wouldn't be that, because an enlightened being wouldn't be boasting about such a thing. But or perhaps saying that people don't have enough help. They don't have the proper guidance. It's his way of saying that. And so he mentions what's known as Bujizen. Bujizen is thinking that everything is okay because everything is non-separate and everything is perfect and all the conditions are harmonious and all things everywhere. Then there's nothing to do, and I can just sit here with my fly whisk, and all will be well. So they think that having nothing on the mind is the way Cleary translated that. And don't demand intensive Zen concentration in association with the teacher. So he very much, Ru Jing is very much valuing the student-teacher relationship and the way that that can motivate people to bring some intensity to their sitting practice. And it said that he worked with this Taoist elder, which is lovely, and his followers. And we'll see when we get to the Dogen story that he was also very accepting and flexible with Dogen regarding the formalities of the hierarchy. So Keizan ends this chapter by exhorting us to develop, and I would say study, realize, observe your mind fully. Concentrate only on truth and don't follow the fashions of the time. And this poem, the breeze of the wave blowing far is harder than a diamond. So that's referring to the diamond seat, right? So it said, we saw that the diamond seat was the one of the Buddha, and that Ru Jing sat through, he vowed that he would sit through even that. He would break through even the seed of diamond. And so for that reason, the way is harder than the diamond in the poem. And the whole earth is involved too. And then Dogen. So Zen Master Dogen, he is the founder of the lineage that we've been studying all along. He was a Japanese. He studied with Ru Jing. And Ru Jing's teaching at that time was Zen study is the shedding or the dropping off, is the way it's often translated, of body and mind and body. And at some point that opened up for Dogen, and Dogen went to Ru Jing's quarters, as he had been previously given permission to do, to show up at Ru Jing's quarters, and said, my body and mind have been shed. And as I said in my comments, I think that this next line from Ru Jing is not an approval or a confirmation, but rather it's another instruction. And the next instruction is body and mind shed body and mind. Meaning there's still another layer of letting go that hasn't happened here. And Dogen said, oh, don't approve me. And Ru Jing said, I'm not approving you. You didn't get it. Go back a step. So then Dogen, being the sharp kid that he was, said, what is it that isn't given arbitrary approval? So what is the kernel of what you're trying to show me here? Show me one more time. And Ru Jing said, shedding body and mind, meaning not you shed body and mind, right? But that even even that cognition of having something drop off must also drop off. And then Dogen bowed, and then the shedding was shed. And there was some acknowledgement that there was the water meeting water, so to speak. So we hear a little bit about Dogen, his life story. He was, sort of distant Japanese royalty, if you will, minor Japanese royalty. And he was very touched by the death of his mother. So he had a very early experience of impermanence. And he learned how to read Chinese thanks to his grandma. Thanks, Grandma. That came in handy later. And which would make sense in terms of his having been from an upper class social caste, an upper class family. And just when they were going to make him part of the government or some kind of administrative governmental post, he snuck away and became a Tendai monk. And so Tendai Buddhism is a Vajrayana form of Japanese Buddhism. It's a form, very ritualized form, and a form which assumes that everybody is already a Buddha. And that was Dogen's problem with it. So that's what sent him to China, actually. But in the interim, he also had the good karma to become a Rinzai monk and studied with Myozen. Myozen was quite dedicated to him. In fact, Myozen died on their trip to China. So they went together over there, but Myozen didn't come back. And it was there, of course, in China, where Dogen, after achieving the heights of arrogance, basically interrogating all manner of Chinese monastics, Chinese abbots, Chinese teachers, Chinese monks, and nuns, presumably, finally was met up with Wu Jing, and quote unquote, as Keizan says, at the very outset, his attack was blunted. So Wu Jing managed to show him, demonstrate that he had something to teach him. And they developed this very close relationship. And Dogen really very much wanted to be very close to him, although he declined to be his attendant. Surprise, surprise. And again, Dogen is also, as we've heard from all of these folks, very, very persistent. Is said to have not laid down flat for years. Right? So he would have slept kind of sitting up, leaning back against. There's a cabinet at the back of what's called the tan, the sitting platform. He would have slept leaning back against the it's called a kanki. In Japanese, I have no idea what the Chinese word is. Yep. So, and then he went around seeing people's succession documents, I think as a way of trying to integrate this experience that he'd had with Myozen, and yet awakening with Wu Jing, with two different Zen lineages, and trying to kind of incorporate all this. And then we have this very, very interesting material from Keizan about basically what amounts to 4 kinds of mind. Yeah. And he's using these words in very different ways than most. In fact, if you looked at the Soto Shu official translation, in the little footnote, it says that this is unorthodox. This is an unorthodox way of presenting what the meaning of mind is. But suffice to say that he says that even the mind of discrimination or responses, reactions, the mind of perceptions, and even the basic awareness, which is not influenced by those things, none of those are quote unquote original mind. That original mind is someplace where there is no body or mind. And that's why Wu Jing was always telling people to drop off body and mind. There's and so that sounds very much like nirvana, right? Starts to sound a lot like the Heart Sutra. So clear as pure light, no inside or outside, says the verse. Right. No inside or outside. Is there any body or mind to be shed at all? When it's all mere phenomena, then can we even drop it into those categories? And finally, Ajo got the one up on Dogen. Like, that is impressive, I will say, because he was a specialist at language in many ways. But Dogen said to him, one hair goes through myriad holes, which is a teaching that means, and is a very common teaching in Zen, if you penetrate one Dharma fully, you penetrate all Dharmas. So that's what Dogen, I believe, was trying to say by saying one hair penetrates myriad holes. But the issue is the holes. There isn't that separation. There aren't little separate things, right? There is only the full penetration, completely interpenetration. And so that's why Ajo gives this brilliant question. I do not ask about the one hair, right? I don't ask about the universal Dhamma, but what about the holes? Brilliant. So Dogen smiled and said, gone through. You got it. You nailed it. Right? And again, so Ajo had been from the Tendai school, so they also had a very, very close affinity that way, right? They had a very close understanding of how their thinking had evolved, how their training had evolved, how they moved beyond. They moved from one form of understanding the Dhamma to another. And it said that Dogen treated Ajo just as if Ajo were the teacher, and he gives the polite excuse of saying that it's because Ajo will be his successor and carry on. But I think also that it really demonstrated Dogen's heart of care for Ajo and appreciation, respect for him. And if you go to Eiheiji, if you ever have an opportunity to go to Eiheiji, and maybe some of you have been, we should talk about that. That is the sense that you get, that the training is very much about care. It's not as harsh as other places. It's very regimented in certain ways and very prescribed, and yet there is a definite sense of care. So this lovely phrase from Keizan, like water and water, or like space meeting space, right? Rather than individual holes with something that's not the universal Dhamma in between. No, it's like water meeting water, or space meeting space. There's no sense of separation or distinction there. So, Keizan advises us not to stop at just joy and quote unquote conditional happiness. Okay, check, got that. And he also says, don't even establish the single hair, much less the myriad holes. Ah, beautiful. Keizan takes us right to the universal over and over again, the universal within all things. Within all things. It is like waking up from a dream, only alive and active. In the vastness, there is nothing to rely upon. This beautiful echo that to me sounds a lot like Wei Nung's winning poem. Nothing there in the vastness, there's nothing to rely on. So who is there to talk about it? Don't say that one hair goes through the myriad holes. The bare and clean ground hasn't a trace. There's nothing left over. So that is a recap for this evening. And I think we have plenty of time for some questions or some comments.
What is the main difference between the Tendai school and the Soto school?
That's a good question, Pedro. So Tendai school is very, very different. Tendai school, again, is a Vajrayana school. And so what that means is that is very, and can't say a lot about it. I only know a little bit about it. But it is, so the assumption is that everyone is already Buddha, and that by completing certain rituals and chanting to certain depictions of different deities, that one is just simply expressing that fact over and over again in different ways. And so, yeah, so it has to do with like visualizations and chanting and a lot of instruments and that kind of thing. It's still there today, Mount Hiei. There's a big temple complex there still. And so it would, by Vajrayana, I mean, it might look like or have more of a feel like Tibetan Buddhism than it would feel like Zen. Okay, if that makes sense to you.
Gotcha. Yeah. I've seen a documentary about the monks at Mount Hiei. They train by walking these incredible distances up and down the mountains in the cold. There's crazy dedication involved in that. So I've seen a little bit of it.
They also do, yes, these kind of very, very intense devotional practices. Like, I think that in order to become a monk at Mount Hiei, you have to literally run the equivalent of a marathon for 7 days without any water. It's like people can't even stand at the end. It's really, really very, very difficult practices. And that side of it is devotional. It's like you're just demonstrating your devotion to the way, to your willingness to just give it all.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, so Dave, I'm going to ask you to use the mic, even though the mic might not have a lot of juice on it, but this way everybody can hear you and I don't paraphrase what you're saying. Yeah, it's going to bleep at you because it only has a little bit of battery left. So wait, let's see if you can see Dave over there. Let's see Dave. There's Dave.
So my question was, the observation was like, it seems that what Dogen was saying is very rugged individualism kind of a thing, compared to what Shariputra had talked about, like the spiritual life is all about the Sangha kind of a thing.
Yeah, hold on to that in case you want to talk later. Yeah, so that's a good point. And I would say that yes and no. It's funny because Dogen does talk in that way, that there's a lot of sense of the independence of one's practice. And yet the kind of practice that he set up is classically Japanese in the sense that everybody does the same thing all the time. Like you can't even take a bath by yourself. You don't sleep by yourself. You don't ever sit by yourself. You do all the ceremonies together. It's all completely done in community. So maybe he doesn't talk about that so much because it's assumed, he's like, that I think is part of the, kind of classical Japanese sensibility of one's relationship or obligation to the community. So, and I imagine that he would have gotten a lot of reinforcement from that, from Rijing too, because of the, Chinese also has, although they have the hermit tradition in the mountains, and you shared that movie. There are several movies about that, and Bill Porter, Red Pine, who you saw in one of the videos, if you took a second to do that, if you had time. That's kind of the exception because most of the monasteries would also be, very much a group practice. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, I think it's because I think part of the reason he speaks like that is because of his own, struggle to kind of work it out for himself. Like, what is the true teaching? What really is happening? Think about it, even I think it was a month long, the boat trip between Japan and China at that time. You know, it's a big step. Thank you for the question, Dave. All right. Other comments or questions? Otherwise, then it's going to be time for you all to do the speaking or the showing of your images or whatever you want to do there. Yes, Gareth.
You said a couple of words about Dogen wandering around looking at all the silks, the transmission silks.
Mm.
But I felt there was something important going on there that I didn't quite get. Because all the schools, there's some integration, there's something going on there that I missed. If you could talk about that just a little more, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, well, so to speculate a little bit about what it means, because I don't think Dogen ever actually wrote about, you know, why he did that or what his experience was of that. I think these comments from Kazan are the only place that that's recorded, as far as I know, or at least it's the only time I've ever run across it. So for him, I mean, many things are involved there. One is, obviously, those things are secret. And it says so, right? In the comments there, like those masters said to him, I've never showed this to anybody, right? When I received my transmission documents, I will tell you that it was hammered home many times. You are not going to share this with anybody. You don't even talk to people about what they are. They are that secret. So the fact that he had these very, you know, kind of private moments with these teachers and sort of acknowledging again and again that they had received the transmission, that they had had the same awakening that he'd had. I think that's really what it meant for him, to see that over and over again, and to see that would also have related back to his Tendai again, right? Because so Tendai was he would have been initially raised as a monk with a very, very, very strong, like inculcated with this very strong value of the sort of devotional capability or the sort of magical value of papers, of ritual objects, right? Because it's a Vajrayana tradition. So ritual objects mean a lot. I think he, in the end, divested Zen of a lot of this kind of magical aspect of it, but he kept the ritualized nature of it, right? He kept this kind of sense that there are objects, there are things that could show you that somebody had that relationship, that somebody had such a trusting and deep and meaningful, awake relationship that they received this piece of paper, or they received the follow-on, you know, the whisk and so on. So some of the things are ritual objects that are meant to be shown, like the whisk. So I showed you my whisk. I showed you, this is one of my transmission documents. You can't really see it too well on the screen, but this is one of the transmission documents that's intended to be shown because it's on the rakusu and you're supposed to wear the rakusu. This is my fancy rakusu. I also got a casual rakusu at the time in brown. But again, there are many things where it's just hush hush. Mm-hmm. And I will add one other thing about that, just as an FYI for you, as a point of interest perhaps, is that up until Zen reached the United States, there was never any inclusion of women in the transmission documents. So now various women who had received transmission in the sort of traditional way with only men on the documents, then created some transmission documents that are kind of unofficial, unorthodox, etc., but are related to the ancestral women teachers, and that sort of help us incorporate that aspect of it too. And that was beautiful. That was very much a part of my transmission. There was even a ceremony at which I think we called together like about 25 Dharma transmitted women and just did, yeah, beautiful. And just did, some incense offering and some chanting together and just some recognition, just looking around that circle, like, wow, powerful experience.
I actually just picked up the hidden lamp for my mother for Christmas. I think she's really going to enjoy this. So.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, some very, very beautiful teachings in there, both ancient teachings and much more contemporary stories and teachings in there. Beautiful. Yeah. Well, do we feel like we're ready to transition to the tell me about awakening without telling me about awakening? All right. I see some nodding of heads, so that's good. That's encouraging. Yes, Michelle, do you want to go first?
I'm sorry, my internet is just kind of messed up right now, so I didn't hear everything. But I did have a question. Pedro, thank you for showing that book, because it was reminding me that there was something that you had said early on about 3 different levels of understanding a koan. And I didn't get those, write those down. And I just wondered, is that something you could tell us here or write it in the forum? Thank you.
Yes, that's a good question, Michelle. I wouldn't always put the 3 layers of meaning into the same categories, but generally speaking, it's like there's a literal meaning, which only makes sense oftentimes if you understand, the sort of poetic metaphor type of language, the sort of cultural context. And as I said in one of the talks, sometimes you can do a little research on that. You can find it in a footnote somewhere, or you can find it at the back of the koan collections. There are some helpful pointers oftentimes about what a phrase or a word might be used in an unusual way in a particular koan. So anyway, but there is a literal meaning. And then there is a meaning which is, you could say, more general, but still at the subjective level of human experience. So like everybody feels grief. So I'll give you an example. There's one of my very favorite koans is appropriate response, right? The student comes to the master and says, what's the teaching of a lifetime? And the master says, appropriate response. So now, at a literal sense, you could say maybe what the master means by that is, good question. That the mere fact that you're asking that question is an appropriate response to the training that you're getting right now. Like, keep asking that question, right? What's the teaching of a lifetime? What is the teaching that really resonates with your own lifetime? And then another layer of understanding of that response would be something like, right, if I were to give you the teaching of a lifetime, that would be an appropriate response between me and you. That would be generally true at all times. So any teaching that responds directly to the student's needs, the student's particular karmic set of conditions, would be the teaching of a lifetime. So you could say that would be like second layer of meaning. But then the third layer of meaning is this much more, is you could say a non-dualistic way of thinking about it, or a more, holistic way where the subjective and the universal become interpenetrating. So the way to understand appropriate response means that all things in your life, a lifetime, everything that you experience is an appropriate response. It is this set of perfect conditions that are moving and responding to each other and creating the world that you see. So that's like third layer understanding of that particular koan. So in general, so you see what I'm saying? So it's not, you couldn't necessarily always say that they always fall into those buckets, but in general, my experience is there are always three layers. There are always three layers of meaning. If you only caught one of them, if you only saw the universal, for example, which is what I see oftentimes people will do, they'll like catch a whiff of something that is, you know, applies to everybody kind of thing. That's great, but you have to catch, you have to do this ability to interpenetrate the universal and the subjective in the response, in the understanding. Otherwise, it's not a whole response. Otherwise, it's just one side. Again, it's just one side of the coin, so to speak.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so maybe that's our last question for tonight, and we'll shift now to some kind of sharing if folks want to share something, a poem, an image, something you painted or drew, or some object that means something to you. Sometimes a movement. Oftentimes koan, the ultimate koan response would be some kind of movement or some kind of like performance of the thing. Okay, Pedro, please.
Yeah, I wrote a short poem. I was trying to keep it in the style of Kazan, very kind of short and right to the point. All right, my poem goes, it's called Riding the Metro by Pedro Barros. Riding the metro is a Buddhist practice. The beginning, just getting going on the right path is difficult. Once you're on the path, you instantly begin to await the final destination. Oftentimes, the best part is overlooked as we forget to enjoy the ride itself.
Haha. Sweet. Beautiful. I like that metaphor, huh? Getting going in the right direction. Yes, yes. And enjoying that experience on the way to wherever that thing is, huh? Someplace you've never seen before. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Who else would like to share? Anybody else have something they want to share? Beth, and then Patty.
I'm going to share my screen because it's a photograph, and it's going to take a little bit of explanation, but if you will bear with me, let me see if I can.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2006 and 2012, I had kind of a performance art project where I was telling fortunes with my cell phone. And people who had a question were invited to call me. I was the oracle. And I did not know their question. They had to keep it secret because the idea was to randomly create photographs that would be the answer to their question. So wherever I happened to be, space and time when they happened to call me was my starting point. And so this one I thought was just absolutely perfect. Someone called me, I took the pictures. It was actually a Sangha member, and the question was, does a dog have Buddha nature?
Great. And what is that picture in the middle? Can you say something more about that? Or are we supposed to interpret that?
Well, it's kind of pulled out of context. I was, when I got the call, I was with some people on a little state highway, and as soon as we could, we pulled over, and it was like an abandoned secondhand store. And in the window, somebody had made like a what do you call it when things dangle?
A mobile.
Thank you. A mobile with these planets, and it's handwritten, like that one says Mercury and that one says Mars.
Great.
And it's on this coat hanger, one of those awful wire hangers, and it was just hanging in the window. And so
Mm,
and I got
love it.
I thought we both, it was Richard, if you're
Mhm,
familiar.
mhm.
We looked at it and wondered, said, wow, that really worked. And so thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that was great. Thank you. Next time I see you, Beth, we'll talk a little bit more about the project of being the Oracle. Nice. Okay. Who else would like to share? Oh, yeah, Patty, you're next. Okay.
Thank you.
Amazing.
So the request of a creative expression gave me anxiety. I don't think of myself as particularly creative. So I thought about it for a while and thought about maybe doing a poem, but what came to me was that my Buddhist priest robes, my Soto Zen priest robes, and my vows are my creative expression of my life. And it's in the moment and ongoing.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Mm. In the moment and ongoing. Mhm. Yes. 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 Okay. Margaret and then Harsha.
I didn't create something on my own, but what came to mind for me was an expression from Soen Nakagawa Roshi, who is Rinzai, or was Rinzai, and it is in my background. And it's a pattern of sayings that he used to say that apparently his students remember. All is purified as it is now. All is revealed as it is now. All is realized as it is now. All is enlightened as it is now. Okay, okay, okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Margaret. I think I had heard that before, but it's been a long time.
He was quite a character.
Soen Roshi. Yeah, he was. He had a lot of memorable sayings like that. Mm. Mm. Okay. And then Harsha, would you like to share?
So I wrote a small poem. It's called Nishprapancha. And it starts this way. So it says, Prapancha, some mine, some not. I, mine or not I, nor mine, nor not. Such is Nishprapancha.
Hmm. Miss Prapancha. Is that what you're saying?
Nishprapancha.
Nish. Okay, okay.
Nishprapancha. Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Mm. Well, you certainly captured the Zen style of using the language there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
One of the meaning I thought of it is, I-ish in Prapancha could be Nishprapancha. So not really I, but just I-ish, Yeah.
Excellent. Yes. We'll keep turning it, Harsha. I'm sure maybe you'll find some more meanings in there. Okay, Gareth. Yes.
All right, so I didn't write a poem or anything like that. This would be much better if you'd seen this about 8 o'clock this morning, because Beth and I were talking about this and said, oh, we've got to do this thing tonight. Just had this idea, so here we go. Oops.
Oh, look at that! You disappeared. That was even better.
That's perfect. If I was going to put my, I was going to say, what I would expect you to do is to take it off and throw it in the water or cover it up or something like that. But it just disappeared.
Yes.
Perfect.
Perfect. That's great. Wonderful. You see, that's why we do it. Because 8 o'clock this morning would have been different, huh? Then you come and you do it and it's totally different. I love it. That's great. Yes, Ashley. Or were you waving at somebody else?
Oh, no, I was raising my hand.
Okay.
So I like to paint and I like to paint Dharma principles. So I have all kinds of paintings about stuff. But this one is one that I painted earlier this year. Let's see if I can share my screen. It's called Obliteration of Self. And it's based on the student-teacher relationship. Can you see my cursor if I move it?
Yes.
So I don't know if you can see it clearly, but there's a person prostrating here, theoretically. That's like the head and the arms coming out, and they're down on their knees. So there's this person prostrating, and then I'm sure you can recognize the monastic figure. Both of which are empty, and the paint is let's call it interpenetrating.
Mm-hmm.
And in the background, there's like 6 or 7 layers on here, and the background layer is like what we see in the world. It's like grass and flowers and trees and stuff, and there's a sunset over here, and there's all kinds of stuff. But then there's more layers on top of it, and the layer that's like the black and the gray with the specks is like infinite space or emptiness. I mean, obviously it's not infinite space or emptiness because it's just on a piece of paper, so like it can't be that big. But the idea is that it's the inverse of what we usually think of. Like we usually just see the world and we think that like somehow the space is underneath it, but it's the flip of that, like that the space is actually over all the stuff. And that if you were looking rightly, you would that's what you would see, not the world, right? You would see the space and not the world, not the objects. And so, the persons are very empty and hollow, and mixing in with all the stuff. It's hard to do a painting of this, but like that was my best effort.
I appreciate all the layers of meaning in there and the literal layers of paint and all that. I appreciate that. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, I don't want to be the last person. I think there's one more person besides me. So I'm going to go, and then, or actually two more people, if everybody's going to share. So I'm going to do my thing, and then there'll be two more people potentially who are going to do their thing, and then we'll come back to dedication of merit at the end of the evening. So I also do paintings, and I do poems, and I do all sorts of different writings and things like that. But for tonight, I decided, I was going to show this one image, and then even that I thought, no, that doesn't capture it sufficiently. So here's my tell us about awakening without awakening. Ready? I have to turn the camera back this way. Sorry, David, because you can see and they won't have to see. Okay, here we go. That's it. That's my tellus. Okay. Any other folks who want to share? No, it's optional, so you guys don't have to if you don't want to, but.
I wrote a poem.
Okay.
It's not my poem. I didn't write the poem.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wait, he's gonna put his mic back on there.
So I brought a poem which from David Whyte, and I feel that it relates to what we covered over the past few weeks. So it says the name of the poem is Start, Close In by David Whyte. Start, close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, close in. A step you don't want to take. Start with the ground you know, the pale ground beneath your feet, your own way of starting the conversation. Start with your own question. Give up on other people's questions. Don't let them smother something simple. To find another's voice, follow your own voice. Wait until that voice becomes the private ear listening to another. Start right now. Take a small step you can call your own. Don't follow someone else's heroics. Be humble and focused. Start, close in. Don't mistake that other for your own. Start, close in. Don't take the second step or the third.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Start, close in. Yes. Very good instructions from David. He always says, I'm not a Buddhist. But if you Buddhists like my poetry, that's great. Yes, Michelle. Oh, and we saw Charsley too, right? Ah.
Yeah, so I'm very new to this whole Zen idea, and so did my best with things I had around the house. And this is a feather. It's
Mm.
from a sandhill crane. And the sandhill crane does this really crazy migration, just way from the south to the north. And I feel privileged to have this because it landed here in the valley that I live in. I live at a flightway. And I guess, I didn't quite know how it all sort of works into Zen, but it's another miracle of life, I guess. And anyway, it's beautiful. I wanted to share it with you all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Right here, this one thing, right? This one thing also, this one thing too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hello, and I guess I will pass.
Okay. All right. And that too is your statement, huh, Charles? All right. Mm-hmm. Great. So I think that's everyone, huh? Everyone had a chance to share. Lovely. And we're at the end of our time. We're pretty close to the end of our time. So I want to, a couple of announcements. So let me make a couple of final housekeeping announcements before we dedicate the merit. So the recording for tonight will go up on the playlist as everything else has. And what I was planning to do was to have the playlist be just for this group of people for, another few weeks, maybe until the middle of January or so. And then if everybody's okay with it, then I would open that up to the public and I would make this class available as a public class. Okay, so think about that. If you have any concern at all, then don't hesitate to tell me. As I said before, like the English Summer Book Club will not be made public because there was somebody who felt uncomfortable with that. And that's fine. The Spanish one probably will end up getting made public. So it's just like that. It's like, you think about it, you let me know if you have any trouble. If I don't hear from you, I'm assuming that it is okay and it won't go up as a public class. And that just means that I make a little news post about it and that it becomes public on the YouTube page, because right now it's not discoverable except by you guys you guys and gals who have and other folks, other genders, everybody who have the link. So that's that about housekeeping things. And then yeah, so thank you all for participating and for your contributions, because the course isn't anything without your participation and your contributions. And stay tuned. I will be in silent retreat for most of January, but there will be some new things going up on the calendar for next year. So and if it's of interest, if you need more resources or anything around Zen, then I'm happy to reply. So that is all I wanted to share for the housekeeping things. So again, thank you so much for participating and for being here and for practicing wherever you are. And I want to dedicate the merit of our practice during this time to the awakening of all beings and to the many, many, many folks who are seeking that which is beyond this body and mind, who are exploring what it means for this life to be a full expression of Dhamma. So may all beings awaken, and may you all be well and happy and completely fulfilled in your path. Kanzeo namu butsuyo butsu inyo butsu enbu poso enjo rakugajo. Chonen kanzeo bonen kanzeo. Nennen jushinki nennen fudishin. That's the evocation of Guan Yin or Kannon or Avalokiteshvara, that evocation of the Bodhisattva of compassion. So may she be a support to you as well. All right, everyone. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you for everything.
Happy New Year, happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Happy New Year, happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for your contribution.
Yeah.